Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis, in this series on the network of global corporate control. Today's segment is pre-recorded and is called Reality, thanks to DCTV, Carmen Stanley, studio producer and director, Maurice Jackson, audio, and Crystal Branton, prompter, and Crochet Starnes, floor director. I wrote the last recorded segment based on what people sent me early that day. This week, I have it more together. Team Humanity has been helping me answer your comments on YouTube. It's not so much work just to monitor the comments and add my 2 cents. What you're hearing in this series is reality. What you're mostly hearing elsewhere is only a nightmare and lies and propaganda brought to you by the Banking Cartel. In last week's segment, we answered the question that many of our viewers have been asking, when they were going to see hard evidence that we are in reality and the rest of what you're hearing is lies from the Banking Cartel. The segment was called The Nantucket Sleigh Ride. We said that the Banking Cartel was like a mortally wounded whale that had many harpoons embedded in it, and it was dragging the rest of us along like a small whaling boat. What were the harpoons? The CIA memo calling the people who figured out that JFK was assassinated by the Banking Cartel conspiracy theorists. The CIA's attempt to bribe me with shares in a CIA lawsuit to steal assets from the global debt facility. This is important because I'm the trustee for all of humanity's wealth in the global debt facility, which includes the monetary gold reserves and other wealth of the U.S. and the rest of the world. The Banking Cartel's failed attempt to nuke Charleston and fire a first nuclear strike against the Soviet Union. As proof, we ran a forgotten November 10, 2013 interview by Christopher Hudson that had 500,000 views called Whistleblowers: Secret Plot to Nuke Parts of the USA Exposed. We are just getting warmed up. The Banking Cartel is trying to turn things back around and is failing miserably. We are on a one-way street to getting rid of the Fed. The Banking Cartel made a huge mistake in its September cover story by Kurt Anderson in The Atlantic, How America Lost Its Mind. The first sentence in that article is, "When did America become untethered from reality?" My tweets on August 16th were erased, but not before I took screenshots. I reminded The Atlantic and Kurt Anderson of the CIA memo that had invented the term conspiracy theorist to stop critical thinkers from asking questions about JF Kennedy's assassination. I tweeted, "The Atlantic is owned by the Banking Cartel. America is not haywire. The Atlantic and corrupt journalists are." It comes in handy that I'm a lawyer and that I have exposed the corruption in the legal profession, beginning with Anton Scalia's murder. Remember when Yale Law School's new dean, Heather Gerken, couldn't explain why I was wrong that the U.S. Constitution of 1789 wasn't in effect? A non-response blows the lid off this corruption, I said. Did anybody hear Yale Law School's new dean, Heather Gerken, explain why it's incorrect when I say that the Constitution of 1789 is not in effect? In the DCTV segment on September 13, 2016, we discussed what Yale's alumni magazine, Yale Law School, and the rest of the legal profession were covering up. The cover-up is unsustainable. Lawyers have got to concede the emperor is naked. Robert Spagnoletti, the former chair and director of the D.C. Board of Ethics and Government Accountability, just became the chief executive of the D.C. Bar. At the end of this teleprompter, I will read you my tweet of April 2, 2015 that I retweeted on August 20th and which has gone viral in my social media. It was called "The Dawn of Ethics in the District of Columbia." We're not going to keep on delegating things to the corrupt legal profession because even now they aren't apologizing for their corruption. We're going to have to get comfortable being jack of all trades. Let me show you a letter which I cleared with all the country members of the World Bank about the bankruptcy of the Fed, and which I then sent to all the secretaries of state in the 50 states. I'll read it to you at the end if there's still time. Otherwise, there'll be a link in the teleprompter. On August 18th, Tone Ray reminded me that the central banks are all bankrupt. He asked me, is the global debt facility holding all the cards? And I answered yes. Thanks for reminding me. Then I showed how a Canadian who blogs under the name Rose Nose was trying to make people panic when the reality is that there is open insurrection in the United States military as they follow the Coalition for the Rule of Law, which I and every peace-loving person on earth belong to. Steve Giuliano in the attached email turned out to be a shill. When I outed him, this went viral. It's the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF that calls the shots. That's according to the articles of the World Bank and IMF. I'm on record to the boards of executive directors of the World Bank and IMF and the boards of governors. I speak for the boards of governors and vote the U.S. shares on the boards of governors. Steve Giuliano and his brand Rose Nose is what is known as controlled opposition. He's trying to stampede you into panic and fear when we are all in charge and working together for the common good. That's according to the United States National War College's power transition model, which has an actual 90 to 95% track record. To counteract the fearmongers, just see how all of humanity is doing with the United States military. The treasonous brass are reading my social media. Patience Wright showed how there was a purge when heroes refused to nuke Charleston in 2013 or fire a first strike against Russia in 2015. There's open insurrection in the United States military as they follow the Coalition for the Rule of Law, which I and every peace-loving person on earth belongs to. Yesterday in my social media, another person suggested that General Dunford should be taken out to dinner. Meanwhile, I have bankrupted General Dunford, Donald Trump, and other treasonous banking cartel agents who are bit actors that are lying to you. How can I get away with this? Easy peasy. I'm speaking for the Coalition for the Rule of Law, which is stronger than the banking cartel. Meanwhile, the banking cartel and its agents and lying controlled opposition like Steve Giuliano are merely digging themselves deeper into a hole. So Steve Giuliano tweeted back that I was just as bad as the banking cartel because I couldn't show you the gold or that the gold didn't already belong to someone else. Steve Giuliano accused me of being fractional reserve banking on steroids. My response, and this is on letterhead of the World Bank, we're scrolling through the letterhead. And it was dated the 12th of August in 2017. Subject is Loblaw UFCW Local 1006 A. Carmine Fiore related to World Bank lawyer Karen Hudes, to Rose Nose, CC to Steve Giuliano's list at the end of this email. Dear Steve Giuliano, so now that everybody knows who you really are, you're doing us all a favor by delivering the banking cartel's message. Your point, fractional reserve banking on steroids, because I can't show you the gold. First, I want to show your CC list what the people have been retweeting. Everyone knows who they are and their email addresses thanks to you. Don't be fooled by the numbers of likes and retweets. The counters don't work. Humanity is refusing to be RFID chipped and are reading what else is going on in my social media. You've seen emails from Hungary and Argentina. This dialogue is taking place in all the countries and all the nations' armed services, not to mention the United States National Guard, with whom I'm in contact and remain in contact. We already knew years ago that all of the militaries are throwing off the banking cartel. People can read from the YouTube comments section and the rest of my social media that a critical mass of humanity is well informed and responding. So I have really passed the baton, although I'm going to be as active as ever as long as I can. The battle with humanity is joined. And I responded as far as whether the gold is unencumbered. Under the statute of limitations, after 50 years, claims are invalid. And as far as where the gold is, there are two answers. Wolfgang Struck told me that J.P. Morgan Chase has the video cameras watching the tunnels and the big snakes in the tunnels to reassure us that the gold is guarded properly. The satellites flying overhead with their radio scanners know where the big deposits are, aside from the swimming pool in the Philippine Plaza in the Philippines that has a big chunk of humanity's gold buried beneath it. This gets back to point one, which is whether the militaries of the world, who are also guarding the gold, are on the side of the 99%ers, or on the side of the bankers, or on the side of the brass. You decide. Whose side am I on? That is clear, even to someone as dense as you, Steve Giuliano. Best. And then I signed it as my email as Acting General Counsel for the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and as Overseer Mandate Trustee of the Global Debt Facility. On the 12th of August, Rosenose wrote, "Oh my God, you are Briefcase Carmen on steroids. Every manipulating organization has one. Dear Karen, you and I both know that the World Bank cannot show the world this gold in an unencumbered fashion. Thank you very much. Fractional reserve banking on steroids." Well, we just answered Mr. Giuliano. And on the 14th of June, I said we're in a golden moment when the shills advising that there's no time to avert a financial meltdown are exposed for what they are. So long as everyone understands I have no hidden secret agenda, but I'm completely at the service of humanity. How I came into prominence on the internet is all the proof you need. You can see the years before I reached the alternative media, and you can see the slow progress as more and more people became aware. And then on the 13th of June, 2016, Ray Philippines Assets for the Global Currency Reset to Jose Edwin. The Treaty of Versailles bonds, you call them historical treasures, are not going to be circulated. These bonds are now worth more than $2 quadrillion, and they're held by the Global Debt Facility, and they're going to offset country debt for all the nations. By virtue of these bonds, the Board of Governors of the Bretton Woods institutions has placed the network of global corporate control identified by Vitaly Glatfelder and Battiston of ETH Zurich in receivership. I assure you that the Philippines, together with the rest of the nations, are going to be extricating themselves from that scam called fractional reserve fiat currencies. It's also going to be necessary to properly inventory the assets of the Global Debt Facility that belong to all of humankind, many of which are held in the Philippines. Sincerely, and then I signed it as Acting General Counsel. And on the 14th of June, a friend in Quebec wrote, "Hello, I hope that you're well. I know that you're more than competent, but I just have to mention to you that I certainly hope that we have that reset before someone comes out to the mic and tries to take people's guns. Things will get pretty itchy if that happens. Yeah, we're in Montreal, Canada for the last year for sure, with an exit plan just in case." A French speaker asked me to get to the point. Thaddeus was trying to be helpful, and he asked me about JFK's assassination and the United States Treasury. I answered yes, the banking cartel killed JFK. Everything that the banking cartel is trying in order to get us into World War III has simply backfired. This is because we are onto them. False flags are exposed as false flags before anybody gets excited. At the end of the teleprompter, I'll show you what we wrote about false flags in the June 20th segment. It was Ranvijay Malhotra who showed me on the web archive the press release announcing the global currency reset that the embassies in Tokyo cleared before it was issued on March 9, 2015. The banking cartel took this down, but not from the archive. I want to show you some information about the banking cartel's weather modification. I learned this from Bengt Carlson and tweeted it to you 2 years ago. Already there were signs then that the global elites were about to sink. I told Bengt and the banking cartel that I didn't want to hear any more from them. I'm glad you mentioned the global debt facility in paragraph 11. Too bad your sources are Neil Keenan and Benjamin Fulford, both of whom are Jesuit agents of the Order of Fatima. Your targeted audience is the global elite, and you're telling them that their ship is sinking. This is the day after we asked the global elite to move to the other side of the boat. And then I show you the tweet and the link to that. You write fast, but couldn't you have mixed your metaphor? While we're talking about reality, I want to show you a couple of sentences from one of the 3 statements which I got up in the UK Parliament about the network of global corporate control. When this happened, that was when the National War College's power transition model showed there was a 90 to 95% likelihood that we were going to end the corruption in the international monetary system. I wrote, "Hidden conflicts in the private sector are not readily apparent in the many instances. Jimmy Wales, co-founder of Wikipedia, is advising the UK government in support of the agenda to open up policy making. Yet Wikipedia erroneously reverted my edits to disclose the end of the gentleman's agreement for the United States to appoint the president of the World Bank." I tape these segments twice a month, once live and one pre-recorded. I'm learning how to present proof in a way that doesn't confuse you over the air. The day before I record is a great time to upload the documents on the internet and then just describe them briefly on air. The banking cartel is making its moves to take down the Federal Reserve note. In 2014, I offered all the embassies in Tokyo to exchange their paper currencies for currencies out of gold from the monetary gold reserves. I heard back from Pakistan and Guyana for negotiating for their monetary agreements. Since the United States is in interregnum, I offered to negotiate the monetary agreement for the U.S. with the Mint Council in the United States Mint. As you all know, the Federal Reserve note is not going to remain the currency of the United States. Instead, we're minting United States dollars out of our monetary gold reserves. And we're also going to use local currencies issued by villages and towns. I'm also attaching my response, and that's in the teleprompter, to an offer to fund a refinery project in Indonesia in 2016. The documents show that Ferdinand Marcos used many pseudonyms. The banking cartel thought I was going to be bamboozled by Wolfgang Struck, but we now have a parting of the ways. This is after Wolfgang asked me to sell the Fed's debt of $2 quadrillion for pennies on the dollar. I will only work with Wolfgang Struck if he cooperates with us when we access our monetary gold reserves on a transaction-by-transaction basis that's first approved by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. I vote the shares of the United States on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF and speak for the Board of Governors. The courts are all owned by the banking cartel, and they have nothing to say and have no jurisdiction. The last document that you can see on the teleprompter shows how I proved that the World Bank was corrupted during my 21 years in the World Bank's legal department. I knew from the National War College's power transition model that came to the World Bank in 2004 that the corruption could be defeated by a coalition. I have put that coalition together now, and I'm working with Japan's and Germany's and the United States military. All of us are united in avoiding World War III. I learned this from a retired Marine. The traitors in the United States military are exposed to the rest of us. And I said, glad you mentioned the global debt facility in paragraph 11. Too bad your sources are Neil Keenan and Benjamin Fulford, both of whom are Jesuit agents of the Order of Fatima. Your targeted audience is the global elite, and you are telling them their ship is sinking. This is the day after we asked the global elite to move to the other side of the boat. One of the banking cartel's favorite ways of starting wars is false flags. False flag operations are covert operations to deceive the public in such a way that the operations appear as if they're being carried out by other entities. The term comes from when one ship would hang the flag of its enemy before attacking another ship in its own navy. Because the enemy's flag was hung instead of the flag of the real country of the attacking ship, it was called a false flag attack. Last week, a viewer reminded me of a 2013 tweet of mine. What do 9/11, 7/7 London subway bombings, Spanish train bombing, Boston Marathon bombing, Oklahoma City bombing have in common? Drills. In 2004, when Jacek Kugler brought the power transition model to the World Bank from the U.S. National War College, Jacek told me that we have 5 years to prevent a nuclear war in Syria. During the past 13 years, so far we've managed to avoid this. What have we been doing to prevent the outbreak of World War III? Why, we've been exposing the banking cartel, which is using its highly placed agents to try and destroy the United States of America. We've exposed these traitors and bankrupted them. All of the U.S. Congress are agents of the banking cartel. So is Donald Trump. So are the governors of the 50 states and their adjutants general. So is General Dunford. So is Muriel Bowser, Washington, D.C.'s mayor. So is Neil Gorsuch. What is the banking cartel? The best way to answer this question is to cite the article by 3 mathematicians and system analysts at the Federal Institute of Technology, Vitaly Glatfelder and Battiston of ETH Zurich. What's really going on in Syria? This quote is from an interview with Greg Hunter. Hudis, who was senior counsel and worked at the World Bank for 20 years, charges Qatar, who has all this natural gas, wanted to run a natural gas pipeline through Syria to reach the European market. Who's supplying the European market with gas? Russia. All this business about dead babies and sarin gas is just all to keep us confused. And on the 14th of August, I sent an email to the UCC section of Michigan government. Dear Michigan Department of State, thank you for your response. I've been briefing the Secretaries of State so that they're not caught by surprise in the upcoming transition to replace the unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes and other countries' paper fractional reserve fiat currencies with gold-filled currencies minted from the world's monetary gold reserves in the global debt facility that is administered by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. I just mailed this to the members of the World Bank Development Committee and to those members of the boards of the County Executives of America and Major Cities Chiefs Police Association who didn't receive a copy by fax or email. And we're scrolling through the stationery again. And then on the 13th of August 2015, titled U.S. Monetary Gold Reserves in the Global Debt Facility. And this went to Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and the executive county in Montgomery County, and copied to the ambassador of Germany in London and the National Taxpayers Union, and to the World Bank Development Committee, and to the Chief of Police in Montgomery County, and to members of the boards of the County Executives of America and Major Cities Chiefs Association. Dear Karen, thank you for writing to the SOS webmaster. It appears your UCC documents were filed in the state of Illinois. Therefore, it's unclear of what you are doing with this department. You will need to contact the state of Illinois. That's the UCC unit. And this was showing how the Federal Reserve was bankrupt, actually. I was attaching all of the assets of the Fed because the global debt facility is holding the debt of the Fed. Thank you for listening to another segment in the series on the network of global corporate control. The banking cartel is no longer hidden, and its propaganda and fake news are no longer credible. Reality is quite different than the banking cartel portrays. This means its ability to pit us against one another in World War III has ended, and so has its right to tax us and poison us. Meanwhile, we have exposed how the network of global corporate control is poisoning all of the earth through chemtrails. They are bankrupt, and we are winding them down in the global debt facility.